Live from
Dun,
Portland.
dun, 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 dun,
Oh,
dun,
I know
dun,
this.
do, 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 dun, dun,
Who
dun,
sings
do,
this?
do, 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 dun, 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 dun,
Cocaine.
dun. No,
Right?
but same band.
Oh.
Cocaine.
It's like, is this because I'm Colombian, Pat?
Do, 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 do,
It
do,
is the same band.
Cream
just
is
get-
the band.
Cream. I don't think it went that
Sunshine of Your Love.
Oh.
And I'm going to do a callback to that shortly. So would you just. Anyway,
Sunshine of Your
we're
Love is a
live.
song?
We're live.
So a synonym of cocaine. They
Sun-
just wrote about the same thing over and over.
Maybe.
Now, for disclosure, we do not endorse drugs, and nor have we ever done. I mean, I'm Colombian, so I'm very against it. I was just trying to be a funny joke.
Yeah.
Welcome, people.
All right.
Pat sells
we'll leave
houses.
it
I
there.
do comedy. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
It's your job.
Welcome back to another episode of Open House. My name is Andres Gamboa, and we have Pat Roach, the expert, the Messi of selling houses, the Ronaldo of selling houses. I think every episode I'm just going to call you a different sports figure of selling houses. That's like a joke.
Sure.
So the
I think Messi had a goal because it was on ESPN Top 10 highlights when I was on the treadmill today.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. He chested it down and then just
Yeah.
that
was
Stradivarius
sweet.
of a left foot just bumped it into the net. Beautiful.
Just like a violinist would kick their violin in.
That's
Stradivarius. Anyway.
smoother than the back of a spoon, that guy. All right, so welcome back. How was your week, Pat? What catch us up?
Week is
What's been going
good, except my stupid, well, not stupid, my Pilates class. I'm getting better. And no joke, Robin, who has ended up next to me in a couple of classes, she's, let's see, she's as red as Robin would sound in terms of hair color, skin color. She's kind of like that's why it's easy to remember her name. She stands right next to me, and she's a pro. And when I start doing the moves wrong, she literally raises her hand to get clarification on who's doing it right. And then I got, kind of lectured by the Pilates coach in front of the whole class.
She told on you?
Yeah, basically. I was like, man, this is the story of her life. I guarantee it. Like, she has been a tattletale her whole life, and that's just how it is. But whatever, she was right and I was wrong.
Hold
so I kind of I appreciated the correction.
I thought Robin was the instructor.
No,
So
that's Patty.
Robin's just another.
She's just a co-classmate calling me out
Oh,
for my
Patricio.
own good. For my own
Patricio,
good.
You gotta tell her.
I
She's
know.
telling on you. Okay, so do you think that
So that's
Patty
what-
goes
that's
home
what
and talks
happened.
about you on her podcast?
No,
About
no.
Whatever
I
the
don't think she
podcast
knows
is
my name because she only refers to me as new guy.
no way. So she calls you out
Oh,
in
yeah.
front of everyone and points out that you're new.
New guy. Well,
that's
everybody
cool.
knows I'm the new guy because they all know each other by
She
name.
say, "Hey,
so
Hey, old gal's not doing it right. You should just call her old gal.
old gal. Well,
Even though you
in
know
the
her name's
age
Robin.
in the age range of that class, she is actually not old. There's some
I know,
old
but it's which is
gals
even
in
funnier
there.
to call someone old gal when there's actual
Yeah.
old gals. Like, who was the comedian? He was like, "There's a certain group of ladies that when you get a certain age and you call them gals, they're so old it's like actually like endearing. But then there's like a group of ladies who they're not old enough and you call them old gals and they're not happy about it." So
No,
she's the new
gal.
guy,
It's
the
kind
old
of
gal. Ooh, but just a little jab back.
So
Fight
I
back
think Robin's going to
against
be
a
my
bully.
friend. Yeah, I think she's going to be my friend. I'm looking forward to her coaching me up so I can get really good at Pilates this year. So, what about
Good
you?
job. I became a doctor over the weekend.
Oh, that's right.
I was telling you about
Congratulations.
this off the air. Yeah, I was telling you about off the air. But for people who don't know, my daughter has had some medical issues, and all of that culminates in the fact that she needed a G tube, which is like a breathing tube. Kind of look like a little button on her belly that you could like use, like kind of like a pool toy that you like pull out and like blow up. It looked like that, but we used to feed her through that, and we had it on there for 3 months without her using it before we could take it out, and complications will spare the story, but long story short, it turned out that I needed to take it out from home.
It was something else.
and like something that was inside her body, I took out. It was mine
So I
for
think I know
surgery.
the answer to this question because I saw the video and it's very impressive. And the question was going to be, how nervous were you to attack that problem and remove that G tube? And I think I know the answer.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
I was pretty confident. Well, it's because, but it's people before people. I'm like, oh, these guys are cocky. No, no, no. After all that we've been through, this seemed like nothing. You know what I mean? It just was
Yeah, but
like,
it's also you. You're the type of person who steps up in big situations and goes, "Okay, I got this." It's either you or
sure.
Bree, and obviously she didn't want the job, and you're like, "Okay, I'm doing this, and I'm going to do it."
Well,
So you nailed it.
Bree probably would have done it too, but something poetic felt because I don't know, man. It's really interesting, and I don't know how any other parents do this because it's my first kid, so I don't know. But like I will say this, and then we can get on to the weather and some hot finds. But here's the moms have a really unique relationship with kids because they carry them for 9 months, right? They carry them to term, or if they're preemies, whatever. They carry them in their womb, and then there's like this like unspoken like bond, right? So dads, I feel
Yeah.
like don't get that, so that develops after the baby's born. But luckily for me, I started that bond pretty immediately because I was the one that had to like be taken away with the baby, whether we were checking into what was wrong with her before they put her in the
Mm.
NICU for surgery. So like I had 5 hours of just me and the kid. It was like us two versus whatever the doctors were saying and doing. And so there was like that bond that kind of got built there. And so something about me doing it, I told her, I was like, hey, I know you probably want to do this, and maybe she doesn't. I didn't really ask, but I was like, hey, I need to do this for me.
Yeah.
It just felt like it felt right to me, and not in before people listening, not in like a sexist way because I'm the man of the house. No, 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 none of that. It was just more like it felt like the end of a chapter that was really hard in her life and our lives, and even though Brie was there also at the beginning, something felt like poetic about. I was like, I got this. Like I've been with you.
Did it feel like this is something I can do to contribute?
Yeah, it felt like that, and because of that, so to be well, we're getting really deep, but I guess that's part of getting to know each other. They're like, get to the house stuff. Um,
This is open baby house.
yeah, open house. We're being transparent, and people, if you're listening, by the way, if you're listening and you're already this far, you can skip ahead to the actual house stuff. There's a link in the chat below.
Timestamp, 10
Yeah,
minutes.
there's a timestamp below. Anyway, but to close this, like when we brought the baby home, I was able to feed her, which is unique when you have
Oh,
a newborn
yeah.
because we had the G tube. And so, like for example, Brie could be gone, and I'm like, I got this because I can just feed her directly to her stomach because that's all we could do. And so Brie could sleep overnight, right? So I felt like I was contributing right away because I could do stuff that normally dads biologically can't do. And so when she started breastfeeding, there was like a big letdown for me emotionally and mentally because I'm like, now I'm not doing anything. Like I feel like I'm letting them down. Like all I can do is change diapers and put her to sleep, which is what any dad can do anyway. It's almost any dad could do. But from a perspective of like I was doing so much, and now it feels like I'm not doing enough. And so
Don't worry, your day will come.
yeah,
There's
when
plenty to do.
when she brings a boy home or something.
No, there's plenty to do. So
So
this
anyway,
is one little reprieve.
yeah. So it did also feel like I could do something, and it just felt like I needed to do it, and it was really emotional. Like during it was fine, and whatever. But then afterwards, like as the realization that we were kind of moving on from that section of our life, it was like,
Mm,
oh, that was wild.
yeah.
So, and then we had to close this and a happy note. Oh, we had all these unused like syringes and like hoses. I didn't show you these, but like because you're supposed to use those to feed her with. And so we like invited some friends over, made margaritas, and took out the tequila, and we drank it through the hoses. Yeah,
Did you really?
yeah. I'll send you the pictures, and we'll probably put them on the episode.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was awesome, and the people that one of our NICU nurses that we made friends with, she came, and some of our other friends came, and they're like, "This is hilarious," and I'm like, "This is how we cope with grief in
So
our
did
household."
you shoot the syringe
Hell yeah.
down your buddy's
Yeah, dude.
throat? So you're
I was
just like loading that thing up with like 50 cc's of agave.
Yeah, like mine had. So I looked up how much a shot was in milliliters because that's what the syringe was, and it's like an ounce and a half, which is about 50 milliliters. But the thing went up to 60, so I had about, depending on what bar you go to, 1.5 to 2 shots of tequila per load. and I was like, and I was just downing them, dude. It was awesome.
Delicious.
It was awesome, yeah.
That's
so that was how
awesome.
my week was. I'm sure next week will not be as entertaining as what this was, but that's it. So how's the
That's
weather in
great, dude.
Portland or in Chicago?
The weather in Chicago is.
2 words
I'm
or
looking
less.
out my window. Ew.
Mm.
That is the weather in Chicago. Portland?
Moist.
Okay.
Which is
Sounds about right.
it's
Sounds about
heard
right.
it's moist in Portland. Is
Ugh.
what they say. Oh,
My
all right, man.
sister-in-law, if she's listening, she just stopped based
She's
on
like,
that word alone.
Next episode. Yeah, that's why I said it. It's just,
You tricked me into hearing that. All right, let's talk about some real estate stuff.
okay. Oh, you don't got no hot finds? We're just going straight to real estate?
Oh, no. Hot finds.
Yes, hot
Yeah.
finds.
Thanks, producer Andres.
I got you. I got you.
I got 2 hot finds for you. I'll give you one because since you divulged what yours is, my second one is actually a tie-in to yours.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, but anyway, so Andres, are you familiar with the artist Father John Misty,
No.
otherwise known as a guy named Josh Tillman?
No.
Not the book-selling Josh Tillman guy, but anyway, you're
Father
not familiar?
No. Father John Misty. Tell me about this. Who's this?
I don't know how I found him. It's like one of those Spotify things that throws him in, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing.
Whoa.
So he's got a bunch of albums out, but his newest album, oh crap, how do you even say it? It starts with an M. Mahashmashana. Mahashmashana, which I know everybody who hasn't heard it is like, yep, I just lost interest because it sounds like, we're going to do some transcendental meditation or whatever. But I will assure you, the music is amazing. I mean, don't take it to Sunday school and try and play it there because it will not be well received, but it is really interesting. And, he talks about some really weird stuff in his songs across the board. That's just kind of his thing is to, he's a little bit of a nihilist. So it's kind of almost like, trying to prove the point that none of it really matters.
Huh.
But I find in this album, he actually nods to some goodness in the universe that, whatever. You don't have to agree with him to be able to enjoy this music. It's beautiful. So anyway, if somebody's looking to be adventurous and try some new music, that would be a good find. That I am bringing that to you. That's the value. That is the value you get by tuning in to Open House.
Wow.
You're going to get some hot finds that are worth it. All right,
Now,
Andres, what's your hot find?
My hot find is the last episode of Severance. Now, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but just in general, if you live under a rock. Oh, by the way, here's the definition of nihilism: the rejection of all religious and moral principles and the belief that life is meaningless. For anybody listening that didn't get it, aka me.
I'm glad I used the right word.
Good job. God, check out the big brain on Patricio. I'm going to start calling you Patricio.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay, so Severance. Great
By
show.
the way, that would have, hold on. Patricio would have made the most sense when I'm in Spanish class and they hand out, Spanish names.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think the teacher would have named me Patricio?
No, you didn't get that?
No, Paco. I mean, as a freshman in high school, she names me Paco, and I didn't even know Patricio was an option.
Of course.
But she names me Paco. And so guess what? In Wisconsin, everybody kind of transformed it into Paco. And Paco was literally one of my nicknames through all of high school.
Lovely. Did you know Paco is
Side
short for
note.
Francisco?
Oh, really?
In the way Bill is short for like William. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah. Mexicans have a bunch of interesting nicknames. Do you know what Pepe is the nickname for?
Felipe. I'm guessing.
No.
What is it?
Jose.
Oh, Pep. Yeah, that makes sense. Joseph. The Spanish have that too. We don't have that in
Yeah.
Colombia. But yeah. Anyway,
All right, what's your
Severance.
okay? So
Work-life balance.
Severance.
Great show if you haven't seen it. If you've been living on the rock, I take pride in the fact that. So I will say this for these hot finds, I take my recommendations very seriously. Like if someone recommends something to me and it's not good, I'll give them a second shot. But after the second time that they recommend something to me that is not good, I will no longer take recommendations. At least in that genre. Like if they're recommending restaurants and I go to two bad ones, I'm like, you're not. Whenever you say it's a good restaurant, I'm gonna say no, thank you. Maybe
Yeah,
movies.
we
but
like different things.
yeah, which is fine. I'm not saying people have bad taste. I'm just saying I take. On the other hand, when someone does give me something really, really good, I'm like, whenever you give me a movie to watch, because on the other hand, if I'm telling you, hey, spend your time, there's 2 seasons of Severance.
Yes.
That's like I'm asking you to spend 9 hours of your life, which is a very long time in anybody's life.
It's actually a season and a half, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
now we're
season
like
2
halfway
is
through.
like only halfway through, so
Yeah.
I mean it's not too late to jump on.
Yeah, and it's anyway. So, but I found it by accident. One of my friends, who I take recommendations seriously from, I seen him like, have you heard anything about this? He's like, yeah. And I was watching it as it was coming out. Nobody knew about it because it was during the pandy. But then it got good, and then people started picking it up, and I'm like, I was early to the party. But now everybody's been watching it, and if you haven't seen it, dude, stop listening to this right now. And go watch that,
Wait.
and then come back and pick up with this episode.
Wait, we're never gonna get them back. They're like gonna go. I gotta binge a season and a half.
Think about it, because then they'll be like, "Wow,
That's
these
true.
guys give
It's
good
way better than
recommendations."
this.
And then we'll
Yeah.
recommend the rest of the show, and then they can trust that we have good taste. It's insane.
That's true. So for the 15 people who haven't seen Severance, please check it out.
That's right.
Okay.
So how does your type?
That's interesting that you said work-life balance. Like that's what that is. The
Yeah.
whole time, every single episode, I'm like, I have no idea what this show is about, and I'm following the storyline. I don't get it, and I still love watching it.
What?
I mean, that's for real.
That's what
I've
it is.
never heard this idea of work-life balance.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
It's work-life balance to an extreme, right? Because you forget
Okay.
everything from work, and you forget everything from home while you're at work. The idea is that you don't bring your work home.
Okay.
Type idea.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There
That's
you go.
helpful because
There-
now I can put
that
that in the mix.
Is your hot find, Pat Roach?
That's your hot find.
Lukewarm at least.
Okay. No, it's a hot find. Okay. So just to piggyback on the end of that. So when the most recent episode ended, okay,
Mm-hmm.
they break to music.
Mm-hmm.
And the music, I was like, wait, what the heck is this? So I got out my phone, Shazam. Do you ever use that app
Oh,
for
yeah.
when you're listening to something? And you're like, what is this? So I hits Shazam. It's, okay, Sunshine of Your Love, which is the song I opened today's episode with, as sung by Ella Fitzgerald.
Ah, beautiful.
Dude,
And it all ties.
I'm a huge Ella Fitzgerald fan. I saw her perform live when I was a sophomore in high school. I named my daughter after her.
Oh my
don't know
God!
if you
Yeah,
knew
you
that.
did. I did not
Yeah.
know that you were a big fan. Cool.
So Ella Fitzgerald did a cover of Sunshine of Your Love, and they busted that in for the final credits, and it is ridiculously good. It's
Cool.
so good.
That's a
Like,
hot
just-
find right there.
Yeah, that's a hot find, and it all comes together. All right,
I love it.
timestamp
Timestamp. What are we at?
1854. We should talk about.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's like we're
We
on
have
Arsenio.
We have a live audience here. I should put in like
Yeah.
canned laughs as well. All right, let's open the
Wow.
house.
Okay, open the house. Okay, so there's a couple things we can talk about today like that. One thing that's kind of timely, let's say, is that the new numbers for housing starts were just released.
Okay.
And I'll explain why that's an important thing. Housing starts. Okay, so the current market conditions in many markets around the United States is that, and here, what are we in? What month is this?
This is February.
February of 25, okay? Right now, most markets around the United States are very seller friendly. And how does that happen? It's all supply and demand, right? So if you've got a situation where there's 5 houses available and there's 10 people who need to find houses, if you got one of those houses, it's going to get more valuable because you can hold out for who's willing to pay the most.
So
right?
it's like
So,
not hot potato. What's that? The chairs game.
musical chairs.
It's like musical chairs right now. So when it's like musical
Sure.
chairs, it's a seller's market because that means that last chair or the last few chairs are more
Like,
valuable.
there's not a lot to pick from, and if you need one, you better get it.
It's adult
And a
musical
lot of
chairs.
times that means, yeah, sure, we'll just go with that. And what the reality is that let's say you've got a new house that pops up, and there's 5 people looking for that kind of thing, and they all jump in. They have to outbid each other, and so prices keep going up. And so we're seeing homes appreciating in value in most markets around the United States. Caveat, I will say, I just saw some recent numbers for Florida, and a bunch of places in Florida actually have the opposite, where they have more houses than there is demand. So you should expect to see those prices come down. However, we haven't seen a lot of prices coming down in those areas yet. So that'll be an interesting market to keep an eye on. And if we ever have Nick Sproul, our managing broker for the state of Florida, on as a guest, he can talk about the Florida market. But for now, let's just say this. Most places in the United States have more buyers than there are houses. And so prices have gone up in my market outside of Chicago since 2012. So we're on a 13-year run with appreciation for housing. So homeowners love that because their asset just keeps getting more and more valuable. Buyers struggle with that because it makes it, if they say, well, I'm going to wait a year and save more down payment money, which is sometimes what you need to do. Unfortunately, that same house you would have tried to get is now going to be worth maybe, call it 8-10% more, depending on what the market does. So you got to spend more. Once you get a property, you love it because now you're like, look at, I'm making money every year, theoretically, on paper, where this asset just keeps going up. All right, so I say all of that to say, back in the housing bubble, the boom that happened, if you guys have seen The Big Short, Andres and I were talking about that before we went on live. If you've seen that, so the boom that happened right before the bust, which led to the Great Recession. In that boom, what caused that home prices to shoot up? It was, by the way, historically, that was there have been housing booms and busts throughout U.S. history when it comes to real estate. That boom was 5 times bigger than the largest boom previous to that.
Lovely.
Okay, so this was like otherworldly. That's the kind of boom. And that's why when it needed to correct, it had to go way, 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 way down in order to right size the boom, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And if you understand economics, you're like, that's the worst description I've ever heard of how markets work. But if you don't understand economics, then you're probably following with me just fine.
That makes sense.
So anyway, so here's the deal. The reason that boom happened is because they were giving mortgages to people who really were pretty fringy in their ability. They either weren't qualified, but now they were, or they were barely qualified and they were getting lots of money given to them. And so those people go out and buy houses, and then one thing in their life goes wrong, and all of a sudden they're not stable. Their life goes downhill, and they can't pay their mortgage anymore. Now we got foreclosures. And if you have a big enough chunk of people who are in that spot where they can't handle 1 life interruption or 2 life interruptions and without losing their house, it's going to start to show up pretty frequently. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what created that boom and bust. What's creating the market conditions we have now is there just aren't enough houses for the demand that's there. So how do you fix that? You got to build more houses. And so there are people, you got to increase the supply. You got to build it. And there are people whose job is to study these things And what they'll do is they'll look at how many permits are being applied for housing starts. Because if you're going to build a house, you got to get a permit. So they can study how many permits are being pulled, and that tells them how many new houses are going to get built. Unfortunately, they started less building in January of 2025 than they did the year before. Okay, so we're moving in the wrong direction. Now, what explains that? There's probably a bunch of things. Okay, if you are somebody that you like, yeah, it's because Trump was threatening tariffs against Canada, and we get a lot of our lumber from Canada. That might have had something to do with it, even though he doesn't really seem to stick to those tariffs in the way that he talks about it. So I'm not exactly sure how that applies. But on the other side of things, it was super cold through a big chunk of the country in January. And so that could have caused some builders to go, I think I'm going to wait a month before I start doing this.
Yeah, that makes sense too.
But it was cold last year too. So I don't know. Anyway, all that's important to note is that's a thing that we'll probably talk about from time to time, is where housing starts at. And right now we're off to a bad start for the year. And let's see what happens.
How well does that predict? So to put it all in a bow, to make sure I got you right, in case someone kind of got lost in the middle of that. Long story short is right now there in the game of musical chairs, to put it back to that analogy, there's more people that need to find a seat. So the solution to this, and so each seat becomes more expensive because multiple people want that last seat. So one solution is, or the main solution would be, build more chairs. So then people can sit, and then each chair is a little less, the housing, the prices of the chair kind of levels out because there's not as many people bidding for it, so it doesn't get out of hand that it just gets super astronomical.
They got more choices.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So why people won't build chairs could be because something political, like the president doing things like that. It could be, and whether you're a fan of Trump or not, it doesn't matter. It's just the reality of what he said was going to happen, or he was intending to do, and so that tends to drive pricing up in different locations. Or it could be because of weather-related things or people. But regardless, right now, not enough people are saying, I'm going to build a chair, or getting chair permits, to call it that way. So
that's right. So if the word house was confusing, you can switch in chair
in the
and
game
follow
of
the
chairs,
same logic.
But the question then is,
all makes sense.
What happens if, what happens if it just stays down? Are we looking at home prices just skyrocketing then?
Well, skyrocketing, or at least appreciating at some rate. Here's what's interesting too, though. The cold weather thing, as much as I'm like, wait, wasn't it cold last January? It was cold this January too. What is actually true is, even though nationally the numbers are down, where the housing starts are up is in the warmer sections of the West Coast. Housing starts were up. They didn't have that same issue with the cold weather, and they did what we need. I believe the target that we should be shooting for, I'll double check this and get back to you. I think what we need to meet demand is something like 1.3 million housing starts in the United States. I think we've been around 1 million a year over the last few years, so we're just not keeping up.
So
I'll fine tune that. If you know more about this than I do, don't think you might be wrong you might be right to think I'm an idiot, but I'm going to find out what the real numbers are. Yeah. But basically, we're behind.
So in 2023, there's about 145 million homes that are in the country, and there's more people than that are looking for homes, essentially, or looking to buy houses. But what's interesting is then, there's also some of those people are probably already homeowners that are looking to buy rental properties too, right? So then there's someone's got a big ass and wants to sit on 2 chairs. See what I'm saying? Which is fair.
I mean, if they need 2 chairs,
That's fine.
you know. But if they're just hogging them,
Maybe they just want to lay
that's
down.
another thing.
Like at the airport where someone just lays down and takes like 4 chairs at the airport. You're like, dude, you can take 2.
I've been that guy.
Come on.
If you're sick enough, you'll get selfish real quick.
That's fair. Okay, so fair enough.
All right.
Not to make it all political, but
All
that's
right,
good.
so that's
Who's going to build these houses? We're all getting deported.
yeah. That is a real. I just wonder if how much of that is going to show up as we go through the year, is builders not being able to keep up with their housing starts because they don't have the workforce.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it could
And
happen.
again, not to make it political, but there was like something along the lines of like if Trump's at the pace that they're trying to like deport people, I think it's like 1 in 3 people in the housing building, like roofers, lumberers, electricians, like Hispanic men predominantly who are in the construction industry. 1 in 3 of them would be deported by the end of the year. So that's a third of your workforce gone. Imagine
let's hope that doesn't happen.
Imagine that, dude. And it's like we got to build more houses with a third less people. Again, I'm not saying if you like Trump or if you don't like Trump, whatever, but that's just the reality of what the results are, however you want to break that down.
We're going to have to keep an eye on that.
And if they so you might be thinking, well, you can just hire American citizens to take those jobs. But then the problem is the labor costs go way up. So that doesn't actually solve the issue of the housing prices, because now all of a sudden there's more chairs, but it costs way more to build that chair because John did it instead of Jose. And so then it doesn't really fix the housing pricing issue, which is the main thing we're trying to solve here. If each new built chair is just as expensive anyway. Yikes.
Yeah.
Fun times.
It's going to be interesting. And Andres and I are nothing if not journalists, so we're going to stay on top of this story as we go through the year.
More news on this. Back to you, Tom.
That's right. Mike C. So that's a thing we'll talk about as the year goes. Let's see how housing starts
or musical chairs
pan
starts.
out.
It all works out the same.
How many families are still playing musical chairs, or if they've just given up.
That's right.
And now they've come to renting chairs.
They just rented a chair from Rent-A-Chair or whatever. Ugh.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Classic.
Yeah. That's what I would do. All right. So now, speaking of housing costs and pricing and how things work, we wanted to chat today about timestamp. We wanted to talk today about
3253 timestamp.
We wanted to talk about how people get paid. I think that in an effort to have this podcast live up to the name of Open House, something I haven't, and I'm sure other podcasts about real estate talk about this, I just didn't dig deep enough, but we wanted one of the first episodes that we brought out with to kind of show that flavor of what we're trying to do here, of being transparent, is how real estate agents get paid. How does the money work? And one of 2 things can happen here. Maybe you're listening to this going, whoa, that's how you get paid? How do I get a job, Patricio? How can I get a job with you? Or you might go, this is disgusting. How can you make so much money? But then you see all of the work that a real estate agent goes into it and why that's actually a fair way of getting paid and an honorable way of getting paid. Regardless of how you feel at the end of this, the whole point is just to help you understand this is how the money moves in a transaction when someone buys or sells a house. So would you prefer to go through this buyer side first or the seller side first, or is there like a more intelligent way to do this besides that?
Yeah. Well, maybe what I should do is let me start. Okay, so give a little context for why this is such an important topic. This is really a big deal right now. This is something that people talk to me about on every appointment, okay? Whether they're a buyer or they're a seller, at some point they'll say, hey, can you tell me like how much you charge? I know I don't really understand, but I know there were some changes and I think things are supposed to be like negotiable or something like that. And it's like, well, basically they've just heard a bunch of the news stories that were like everywhere back in August when these rule changes were implemented. So why don't we talk about the way it used to work and then how things changed. Okay.
Yeah, that works.
So, All right. Now, keep in mind, I've been selling real estate since 2007. So I've been doing this for a while. And it was interesting to me when I first started to try to even figure out, like, wait, how do I get paid as a realtor? And people were like, well, you charge this much when you're listing a house, and then you know, blah, blah, blah. So here's how this would go. In the old model, I'd sit down with the seller and I'd say, okay, I'm going to sell your house for you, and here's all the things I'm going to do. And my fee for doing all of those things is going to be 5% or 6% or 7%, whatever somebody might adopt as their fee is what you would then tell your agent, or tell your client rather. Okay, now, and this is a little bit tricky.
Sorry, pause.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. So this is 5% of what the house sells for, or what the house
Correct.
costs. Either way, either side of the transaction.
What the house sells
When
for.
you're selling the house.
So it's like,
so if you sell the house,
you're selling the house,
just to keep it very, very simple. So say the house sells for $200,000, and you're doing 5%. So Pat just made $10,000 for selling that house.
Theoretically. But pause there.
Okay, pause there.
Because Pat doesn't get 5%. So what I say to the client is, okay, I'm going to sell your house. Here's all the things we're going to do. My fee is 5%. However, I am going to advertise your property through the multiple listing service, which is then also going to go out to Zillow and Redfin and Trulia and Homes.com, you know, all the other secondary real estate sites. It's going to go everywhere. And in that, it's going to say, hey, buyer agents, bring your clients, and if we put a deal together successfully, you're going to get 2.5% of the sale price.
I see.
As a commission.
I see.
So I tell the seller, I'm going to charge you 5%, but I'm going to use half of that to incentivize buyer agents to come and buy your house. So in the end, I'm going to split that 10,000 and I'll keep 5 and the other agent will get 5.
I see.
Does that make sense?
That makes sentence. Yeah.
Okay. Sentence. Okay. So here's the thing. So that is the way things worked. And if I was working with a buyer, and this is going to start to explain why things started to be problematic. Okay. So early in my career, I would sit down with a buyer and say, here's how things work, and I'm going to represent you, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to help you get the house that you want. And at the very end, there will be a commission paid to my office, and it will be paid for from the seller. So you guys don't really have to worry about writing me a check at any point. You know, this is a thing that's baked into the deal, and they're advertising that. So I know that I will get paid my normal fee so that you guys don't really have to worry about it. Okay. Now you might have a little side conversation like, hey, if you guys ever did want to see a house that wasn't offering my standard amount, we would just need to have a conversation around that together so that you might understand in that particular case, I might need you to pay some of my fee. But my fee is very consistent with where the market tends to be, so that's pretty unlikely to happen. So let's just see how it goes, but that's how things work.
Wait.
Okay.
So when would that happen? Like, can you give me real? You lost me there. So.
Okay. Which part?
The when it's not baked into the contract.
Oh, okay. So let's say, the way it would work is, let's say they go, here's the kind of properties we want. And I start sending them properties through the multiple listing service. And I'm like, okay, here's some properties that have what you are looking for. Let me know which ones you want to go see. And they go, hey, could we go see these 5? Mm-hmm. And I pull those listings up. In the MLS, in the old model, at the bottom of the page, it would say cooperating compensation X. And that was usually a number like 2.5% minus $350 or whatever. It's, forget about the minus. Let's just keep it
simple,
straight. It would say something like cooperating compensation 2.5%. So that's what I usually charge for working with a buyer. So in that case, I'm like, oh, the seller's willing to pay the fee that I usually work for. So I don't really have to talk to my client about it. Let's find out if they like this one. And if they do, and they want to buy it, and I help them get it, I don't have to worry about it. They're already advertising this is what they're going to pay.
Oh, because you're on the buyer side now. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
no, you're good. That's where I lost you. Okay.
Switcheroo.
Understand. Okay.
Okay. So, so the fact is, I never really, and as I went into my career more and more, I'm going to be real honest here. When I was working with buyers, the commission thing was so rarely ever an issue that it just kind of fell to the background. And oftentimes I would have clients that we never even talked about commissions because I knew they weren't going to have to write me a check. And if there was ever a situation where there was somebody who wasn't offering a commission for some reason, then we would talk about it before they made an offer. But that was very infrequently. So it was so baked into the deal that there really was oftentimes there weren't conversations around it. I even had, this is kind of embarrassing, but I had a client get to the closing where they were signing the papers. I'm working with a buyer, and they're signing everything, and they're so excited, and they're like, hey, we feel a little embarrassed to bring this up, but how do we pay you? And I'm like, oh, gosh, I really didn't talk about this with you at all. I'm like, no, see, I get this check right here, and that was paid to me through the seller's broker and blah, blah, blah. And it was confusing for them, and it was my fault because I didn't explain it well. And I didn't explain it well because it was so ordinary of the process that it just wasn't a thing people were very aware of. Yeah. Okay. So bunch of people filed a lawsuit last year, or maybe it was before that, but the verdict came down, and it was kind of like a class action lawsuit where they were like, I shouldn't be paying, if I sell my house, I shouldn't be responsible for paying for the buyer's broker's commission. Like, that just shouldn't be a part of my deal. And
which makes sense.
You know, it totally makes sense in some ways. And then when you realize how it got to be what it was, it's because that only makes sense. So let me kind of walk you through this process. So they weren't wrong. So they filed this lawsuit, and they're like, okay, now the finding was, okay, when you're going to sell a house, you list your house with a broker, and you form a compensation agreement between your agent and yourself as selling the house. Buyer agents have to have what's called an agency agreement with their client. So let's say you want to buy a house, Andres, and you sit down and we're talking about it. Once we decide we're going to work together, we actually have to sign an agreement that says you're my agent and I'm saying you're my client. And as a condition of that agreed upon, signed off agreement, I'm going to get paid X for being your agent through this whole process. Okay. All right. So buyers have their broker, sellers have their broker. Those two things are separate agreements. The buyer's responsible to pay for their buyer agent, and the seller's responsible to pay for their listing agent. Okay? That's the new normal. Now, as much as that makes sense, and that's a better thing because now a buyer actually has to have a conversation with their agent about how they get paid and how much that's going to be, and are they okay with that? Okay? So that's actually good, and that actually improves things. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated. So if you're a buyer, and when you bought your house, do you remember scraping together all the down payment money that you needed so you could get the best rates you could get? And when you guys, were able to get your down payment together, what was the target you were shooting for to try to scrape together?
I think it was because it was the first home, it was 5% only.
Okay, so there you go. And that's common. And it doesn't really matter if somebody's scraping together to get their 5% or their 10%, or if somebody's like, we've been saving for a while, we're trying to get to 20% down. so that we don't have private mortgage insurance and blah, blah, blah. And we can get the best rates. Okay. Most buyers are scraping together their cash for down payment.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a buyer and your agent's sitting there talking to you and says, hey, by the way, my fee is 3%. And when we get done with this whole thing, this is an agreement that says I'll get paid 3%.
From you.
You might go,
yeah,
yeah, from you. You're going to go, well, wait a second. That $200,000 house, that's $369,000. I'm going to need to pay you $9,000. I'm trying to scrape together my down payment. I don't have $9,000. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the harsh reality that probably is what created the old model, is that buyers don't have the money to pay their broker.
Yeah.
So
and
what do we do?
That $200,000 is a very low, that's just a number I threw out for the example. Realistically, the average home price for an average American middle class, if that's a thing, family is like $300,000-$400,000 in most major cities. Prices are $200,000 almost.
And by the way, I just did that wrong. It wasn't supposed to be 9,000. It was supposed to be 6,000. Yeah. So, but whatever.
Still, it's crazy. I mean, it ends up being 10, 15, 20,000
so people don't have that.
The house is really $500,000 and it's not really 3%. It's like 4 or whatever. It was just to make the math easy, but it adds up. Percentages add up quick per 100,000. And as we just discussed, prices are going up by the hundreds of thousands. So, yay.
So yes. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So, and what happened locally for us is that when the change went through, they had to rewrite the contracts that we use. And they rewrote the contracts because if they didn't rewrite the contracts, everybody was going to be submitting their offer with an addendum saying, oh, here's my offer for your house, but I'm all out of cash. So I'm going to need you, Mr. Seller, to pay my broker when this whole deal closes. And I owe him $6,000. So my offer for your house is $200,000. But I need you to pay him. So you're going to pay him the $6,000 he's due. And so the seller then receives that offer and is like, oh, so it's really an offer of $194. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, that's how we had to do it when the rule change went in. We were like, you write your offer and then you include a commission addendum to go with it. So the local boards, after they kind of had a chance to figure all these things out, they were like, let's rewrite the contract. So now when I write an offer for a buyer, there's a paragraph in there that I fill in requesting the seller to compensate my brokerage for my fees as a buyer's broker. Okay. So it's now still baked back into the deal. It's just much more transparent about how much the fees are and who's getting paid what.
That makes sense.
Okay. So where things could get a little bit, so again, and I just wonder if, because this was all pre-existing when I started in real estate, like how people got paid. So I just wonder if the reason it made sense in the first place was because they were like, well, buyers aren't going to have money to pay their brokers, but they need to be represented in these transactions or people are going to get screwed, right?
Yeah.
Because the old model, really, there was a time where buyer agency was not a thing. You could have an agent who was helping you, but they were literally working for the seller. And at some point, the National Association of Realtors kind of woke up and was like, well, this isn't exactly good for people. If both brokers are working for the benefit of the seller, there's going to be some people who get screwed on this deal. So they created buyer agency. So when I sign a contract with the buyer, my loyalty and my focus is to help them through this process. And there's a whole code of ethics that goes around that. And when I work for a seller, my interest is to help that seller. So anyway,
Hmm. Now, question.
Andres.
Does oh yeah, excuse me, Dr. Andres,
Yes.
as we've discussed now.
That's right.
Dr. Dre, even.
Dr. Dre.
Wouldn't there be an incentive for you to not negotiate lower prices if you get paid based on that percentage? You see what I'm asking? Like
Sure.
if I'm the agent that's selling, and I know that we're about to sell a house for 400,000, but I know you can really afford. We're looking for a house around 400,000. Boom, there's a house out there 410, right? And so all of a sudden I'm like, that's just a little out of budget, but I bet you we can negotiate. That happens all the time, right? With at
Sure.
least when we were working with CG, she's like, well, it's that, or we covered closing costs, or there's complications. But for the sake of the question, what as a buyer, since you're getting a percentage of that 400,000 or for 10, there's no incentive for you to, or is there an incentive for you to be like, hey, we're gonna offer 390, have them meet us at 400, but that means that you just lost 3% of $10,000, which is still a chunk of change. I mean, the incentive, like, I guess what's the incentive of you trying to negotiate down if you're gonna get paid on like same X value
Yeah.
of the house?
Well, I think okay, so my take is, yeah, if you're a smarmy realtor, and you're like, I don't really care if they get a fair market deal or not. I just want to get them under contract so I can get a check. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, then you would go, well, I'd rather they bought the 410 house than the 390 house because there's a little bit extra in there for me.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that could be true. Um, I think if you have a long-term perspective, well, there's two things that come to mind when you ask that question. One is, um, if you have a long-term perspective on building a viable real estate business, keeping in mind the number one way people choose their realtor is from a friend's recommendation, right? Then if I have somebody who is a client and I can go all in for them and they can see that and know that and go, whoa, he is like really, really helping us. Okay. He worked that price down from, he told us what fair was and he even got us a better deal than that. Okay. That's the kind of person who tells a lot of people about me. Right. And that turns into more future customers, clients, it turns into super happy vibes in my marketplace. Okay. If I simply just help somebody with a transactional need, like you need a house, I got you a house, I'll get paid, but they're probably not going to go out of their way to tell people about me. So working by referral in the way that I do it, it's actually really to my benefit to try to work every deal as much as I can for my client's benefit. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is 3% of $10,000. Is that
It's $300.
$300?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a lot of money. If you're
compared to the large transaction, that's fair.
Yeah, so like let's say what we were talking about 400,000 was the price of that house.
Yeah.
So if they want the 390 house or they want the 410 house, like would it be in my best interest to steer them towards the more expensive in some way? It's like for the difference in money, it's like just let them pick a house that they want and and then fight hard to help them get that one, because in the end it's not a big difference in money in terms of what the commission turns out as a proportion of
11,700 versus, so I'm trying to do in my head, or 12,300. So I mean, it's not too much.
Yeah, I mean, sure,
it's a $600
there's a
difference,
difference.
but you're still it's more of an investment for you to spend those $600 to plant, possible referrals, happy customers or clients. Yeah, that makes sense.
And in the end, I think here's the other thing. It might also depend on how you got that customer in the first place. So if you now people who buy leads online are going to be like, "You're a jerk for putting me in this box." Okay? But I'm going to put people in a box for a second. If you get your leads online and they're just like, "I got to call 100 people to get 2 clients, so I'm just going to smile and dial and just churn all day long and just get people, and that's just how I get clients," then, you know, every penny counts, I suppose. And maybe you would be more inclined to go, "I want them to get the more expensive house because that's $600. I need that for my ad spend on Zillow or whatever." Now, it's a harsh generalization for sure. And there's probably really good people with, clean consciences and, good hearts that do that. But you wouldn't have
Unlikely.
to. Yeah, unlikely. Theoretically, it's possible, but it's unlikely. Um, so I guess I just, if you're building your business by referral, then how excited your clients are and how they see you going to bat for them makes a big difference in how much they,
Yeah.
spread the word. So,
Yeah, that checks out.
I will say one last thing that if it's in anybody's mind, who came up with this model in the first place of realtors getting paid a percentage of the sale? I actually there are times where I'm like, that doesn't necessarily seem exactly correct or appropriate, because the reality is I have to work just as hard to help that client who's selling a $300,000 house as I do a $1 million house. Like, it literally is the same process, and I'm going to put in the same amount of hours. In some cases, I might have to put in less hours with the $1 million house because it's probably pretty put together and has a lot of things people want. Whereas in a 300,000, you got to help them get that thing, where it needs to be,
creaking,
right?
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So how come it's a percentage when that $300,000 house is going to yield me $7,500 and the $1 million house is going to get me $25,000?
Yeah.
Right? And I put in the same hours for both. It seems weird, but I will say this: on an individual level of an individual sale, that is a true thing. However, what I also know to be true about a career in real estate is that sometimes some buyers, you take them out to see one house and they're like, "Let's do it." And they buy that house and you're done and you got paid and it didn't take very long. And in some of those cases, it's like, wow, that was super fast. However, I have had clients that I have worked with literally for years. Like, I had a client last year that when we were going to the closing, they're like, "Did you realize how long we've been doing this?" And I'm like, "No idea." And they're like, "Well, we just had a notification pop up of our first meeting was 2 years ago. And now we're going to the closing for the house that we just bought."
Shit.
Okay, now in that case, I'm like, I don't know if I got my money's worth out of that deal for the hours spent, so
Yeah.
I think in some houses, it takes a long time to sell them. During the recession, when I would sell a house for the same commission that I charge today, I would take a listing for a year. I would say, "Give me 12 months to get your house sold." Now I can take a listing for like, 2 or 3 months or whatever. And so it's different. But it's like there are these changes that make the job very time intensive in some occasions. And in some cases, you probably get overpaid, but it averages out as a career. So I would just say I haven't been able to find a better pay plan for how to sell houses.
And I mean, also you're like, at least with CG when we were working with her, you have to be available like 24/7. Like, taking vacations is probably tough and all that stuff because it's probably slows down in the winter and people aren't buying houses. But like in the like in the summer or when the market starts picking up, you could get. I remember Meredith was like, "Yeah, I get phone calls at like 11 p.m. because I'm like we're waiting to close on something. I mean, I'm sure it evens out and you can manage your business as you start having different clients and situations. But there are situations where it's like, I remember we're like, hey, we're waiting to hear back from this house or whatever, and like there's 6 people that want this house, and we have to be ready to say yes or no at any point of the day, because that's, you know, just that's the nature of the job. It's not like we close at 5, we'll talk tomorrow. So it doesn't work like that sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and then that is really true. There is some time sensitivity around these deals. They're very time sensitive, and so you have to show up for your client in certain situations, and you can create boundaries around that are reasonable and won't hurt your client. So I mean, but if you're negotiating a deal and you know it's got to come together for your client, and it's Friday night and the deal hasn't come together, and you get home and you've got people over, and there's still maybe another round or 2 of negotiations to go. If I have to step away from a party to, you know, make a, you know, an offer or counter offer, I have to do that for my client. Like the thing's about to happen, you got to do it. So that can be inconvenient, but at the same time, when my kids were younger, if they had a track meet, I'm putting the track meet in the calendar, volleyball match in the calendar, soccer game in the calendar. So I mean, I had some control over the things that I needed to show up for. But like last night I had an appointment at 7:30, and tonight I got an appointment at 7 p.m. And it's kind of like, do I really want to go do this?
Yeah.
Not really, but if I don't do it now, it's just going to pile up. And so I might as well knock it out. And we didn't have anything going on, so I got to do it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, okay, one last question, and then we can wrap up. As far as like this goes, like I'm assuming not every agency or brokerage pays the same, right? So like your company probably pays agents different for, I don't know, more or less than others or compared to others, but then there's probably different incentives and stuff like that. Makes sense, which is why people work here versus there. So and I'm guessing, I think, unless it's like an industry standard, which that could also be the case. But like in insurance, for example, commissions work differently. Like some people get paid like 110% commission versus this brokerage only pays 90%, but it's because you get ownership or what, you know what I'm saying? Like, is that
sure?
I guess so. The question is, how does it vary between agencies, or like what? If I'm sitting here listening to this, going, "Hey, I've always wanted to get into real estate. Thank you for explaining how I get paid. That sounds really interesting to me. But Pat, why would I work for you? How does versus like, you know, whatever real
okay
place locally?"
I'm gonna defer that question because that's actually a big topic.
Cool.
And we can do a whole show on that. So the reality is how different companies decide to pay their agents is a big deal, and there's a lot of variety in that. But there is a question embedded in there that I think is appropriate to this conversation in this way. Like whatever. So this is the truth about commissions when it comes to real estate. Okay, and when I first heard this, I was so confused. But I have an understanding of it now that I'll share. Here's what's true. And they teach this to you in your licensing class, and they talk about it all the time. All commissions are negotiable. All commissions are negotiable between an agent and their client. Okay? Now, when I first heard, and they kept pounding that when I was a new agent, I'm like, wait a second. Why is my pay negotiable? When if you go into Target and you're like, hey, I see you're selling this striped shirt for $20, like, let's negotiate. Come on. Who are we kidding here? Like that thing, you know, it's kind of ugly. But if, for 15, I'll take it off your hands. It's like, no. The Target can charge what they want to charge, and it's not negotiable. But I have a different understanding of that now. So all commissions are negotiable. And that is to avoid price fixing. Okay, so if Target went out to Walmart and went out to, I don't know, Kohl's, whoever is big in selling shirts, and Amazon, and just said, look, striped sweaters Okay, everybody, striped sweaters are now $20 a piece. Everybody, good with that? Okay, then that would be price fixing, right?
Yeah, that's called a cartel, actually.
Yeah, and there's a fair market system that says, no, if you want to sell these for 20, fine. And Walmart, if you want to sell them for 18, people are probably going to go to Walmart to get that sweater. Okay, so to use this term, all commissions are negotiable, is to make sure that all the big brokerages do not collude with each other and say, hey, let's all charge 6% with 3 on a side. Okay, everybody good with that? Let's just say that's what it is. Well, that would be collusion, and that would be price fixing, and that would be against the free market system. So to say it's all negotiable actually is helpful. And as an agent, I can decide what I'm willing to work for and what I'm not. Okay, so if I say, oh boy, okay, if I say, yeah, we got to wrap up. I charge X percent. What I should be thinking about is how good am I at my job? Am I worth that much? But I also should be thinking, if they interview 3 agents, is this number going to be market driven? Like, is this kind of like what is a common number so that I don't get undercut with somebody else coming in here saying, well, I'll do it for 0.5% less or 1% less or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you kind of need to know where your market is. You also need to know, like, are you worth what you're asking for? But when you decide that as a realtor, when you decide, here's what I work for, you can go into a listing presentation or a buyer consultation and you can say, here's what my fee is. And it's negotiable, meaning they could say, well, would you do it for this? And I could say, no, actually, I wouldn't. Here's why I think it's worth it for us to have this fee. And here's why I think I'll earn it for you. And I think you're going to be really happy. So it's negotiable. And I also am a part of that negotiation and can decide what I'm willing to pay or what I'm willing to, work for. Yeah. So
very interesting.
There you go. And put a bow
this
on that at an hour 7. I think we're finding we could do this show in like an hour.
In an hour. Yeah, that makes sense.
And if people timestamp the chit chat, so they skipped over that, it was easy.
It's 45 minutes, but everybody wants to hear about emotional trauma of performing minor surgery at home.
And Ella Fitzgerald.
At last. All right.
Ooh. All right.
On that note, peace out, everybody.
Wrap
Thanks for
it.
listening in Open House.